Once more, the little man came to the chamber, as he had come every night before. He asked the queen, "Now, lady, what is my name?" He was laughing when he said it, certain, because no one had ever guessed it. Then she answered first, "Is your name Conrad?" "No." "Is your name Harry?" "No." "Perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin." At that, the little man cried out, "Some witch has told you that! Some witch has told you that!" His voice was no longer playful. It was sharp, exposed. In his rage, he stamped his right foot so deep into the ground that the earth opened. Then he seized his left foot with both hands and tore himself in two. Welcome to the Atlas of the Uncanny, a collection of stories, myths, and strange creatures drawn from the edges of maps and the corners of memory. This is not a place for answers, but of echoes of creatures half remembered, histories whispered, and wonders that refuse to stay buried. Have you ever had someone telling you not to mention a name, or not to mention another name for a few times? Well, that's what we are going to talk about today. We are going to talk about creatures that we cannot name. And I'm going to name quite a few. Hopefully, they will not get angry for me mispronouncing their names. Or maybe they will understand that it's better if I do mispronounce their name. It's safer. The narration you just heard in the beginning is from one of my favorite and first fairy tales I ever read, Rumpelstiltskin or Rumpelstiltskin. It's a very hard name to pronounce. I think I pronounced correctly, but I'm not sure. And that's the whole point, because he is defeated just by having his name mentioned out loud. So imagine if his name was Mark, and he would ask, "What is my name?" And someone would say, "Is it Mark?" And poof, he would disappear in smoke in a more adulterated version, or like we heard, he would tear himself apart in two pieces and then disappear into the ground. The Brothers Grimm really knew how to tell a story, and those fairy tales were horror stories. They were not the adulterated, flowery, and singy-songy versions that you see in the Disney movies or that you read a few years later. And from there, from the original fairy tales, came my passion for folklore and mythology. And now let's get into the episode. Since the dawn of time, we name things. It was a necessity, of course, because, you cannot just point at things all the time, and you don't have everything around you at all times to point at. So you needed names. You needed to know what was what. But then in time, it became even more of a necessity. It became kind of cathartic to name creatures, to name things, to name mysteries. If you name it, you think you've tamed it. Or did you? Tonight we are talking about the creatures we were told not to name, the ones referred to only as him, her, that thing, or you know what, the creatures that live in the gap between language and fear. With their own name, you can take away or give them power. You taketh and giveth away. Across cultures, across centuries, one rule appears again and again. If you speak its name, you invite it in. So let's try to speak around them and not directly at them or with them. What is the danger of a name? Anthropologists will tell you that naming is power. Magicians will tell you the same thing, only with better ropes. In folklore, knowing the true name of a being gives you leverage. You can summon it, bind it, banish it, sometimes even marry it, which feels like a lot of bureaucracy and unnecessary hassle, really. So, if in folklore knowing the true name of a being gives you leverage, the reverse is also true. Some creatures gain power when you name them. So instead, we invent euphemism. In medieval Europe, the devil was rarely called the devil. He was Old Nick, the black man, the gentleman in red, not out of politeness, but out of strategy. Because if hell has a customer service, you don't want to accidentally dial it. And now we have people calling out the name of the devil on a daily basis. We have devils roaming amongst us, and we have devils having the most power. So you see how things change. It's true that we use euphemism. It's also true that we don't want to call some creatures that. So, for example, across the British Isles, fairies were almost never called fairies. And I mean the magical fairies. They were the good folk, the fair ones, those below, the neighbors, which is honestly the most threatening options. It sounds like a horror movie. Calling them these nicknames might seem like it was about respect or flattery, as if people hope to avoid their wrath or at least not directly invoke their presence. But really, it was camouflage, because these were not the glittery winged creatures of children's books. They were old, they were sharp, and they took offense very, very personally. Some might say they were very easily angered. Sweet names and milk left out overnight was not generosity, it was protection money. And if a child vanished into the hill, people didn't say, the fairies took them. They said, the child was away, as if language itself could soften the blow. You can find creatures that are not referred to directly, so as not to summon or anger them. For example, in the Slavic world, the line between werewolf and vampire was never as clear as modern folklore makes it seem. In many pre 20th century stories, especially among southern Slavs, the Vukodlak, the werewolf, is described not as a creature of claws and moonlight, but as what we would now call a vampire. This fluid identity comes from the deep cultural importance of the wolf, where the wolf was not a monster but a sacred figure, tied to protection, power, and divinity. Because the wolf carried such weight, its true name became dangerous. Linguistic and ethnographic sources explain that vampir, and that's not vampire in the wrong pronunciation, but is the Slavic word vampir, emerged as a replacement word, a way to speak about the werewolf without invoking its sacred name, Vukodlak. Other ways to call it were Nepomnik, the one who should not be mentioned, or simply Vuk, the wolf itself. Here, naming was not about classification, but avoidance. You didn't change the creature by renaming it, you protected yourself. Because in these traditions, to speak the true name of the wolf being was not to describe it, but to call it closer. If you want to know more about werewolves, subscribe to the podcast, stay tuned, and soon an episode will drop just about them. And from the werewolves, now let's talk about the lemur, those very cute little monkeys that in Madagascar's movies really like to move it, move it. But what do they have to do with anything? Well, of course, nothing. We are not talking about animals. But their names come from restless, angry ghosts in ancient Rome called the lemures. These were the ghosts of people who died the most violent deaths or were not buried properly, and they were referred to only during specific rituals. Even them, their names were avoided. During Lemuria, the festival meant to appease these ghosts, the head of a household would throw black beans over his shoulder and say, with these beans, I redeem me and mine, whatever that means. Well, this last part I said it is not the householder. No names, no eye contact, no conversation, just vibes and legumes. Because to acknowledge a ghost too clearly was to admit it had a place among the living. And once it had a place, it might not leave. You know how they say, guests are like fish. After 3 days, stink. Imagine having a ghost at home. Maybe they might not stink because, of course, they are immaterial, but they would scare the out of us. I'm pretty sure about this. If this has caught your interest, don't miss our episode on ghosts in ancient Rome, featuring a guide who knows Rome from the inside and out and down and up from every side. So, what if the language fails? Of course, if you cannot talk, you cannot name anything. And some creatures don't just punish naming, they erase language altogether. Across Northern Europe, there are some stories of forest beings whose presence causes people to enter a brain fog, called forest fog, or in Finnish, metsampeito. I think that's the right pronunciation, where they become disoriented and lose words. It is said that those who found themselves in forest fog could eat stones or branches, believing them to be real food. Some people would lose the ability to speak. It's very much like when you have the actual brain fog, when your head hurts, you have a fever, you have a cold, and your brain is not working, and you are at loss of words, and you say all the wrong words at the wrong time. It's pretty much like that. And now I will also tell you how to get rid of it, because of course, there were ways to escape the forest fog. For example, turning your clothes inside out, walking backwards, or with the help of prayers. A specific ritual called binding the forest, that I'm not even gonna attempt to say in the original language, was also used. Ultimately, a seer called a Tietaya could free a person from forest fog through spells and magic. But the whole point of this was if you can't describe it, you can't warn anyone. And if you can't warn anyone, it keeps eating at you. It might be that you lose the ability to speak also because some creatures, they just want silence. Some beings don't want worship or fear or sacrifice. They want quiet. And honestly, I can relate sometimes. Sometimes it's just nice to be in the silence. These creatures exist in an unfinished sentence, in gestures that stop halfway, in stories that trail off with, and after that, no one spoke about it again. These are creatures we were told not to name. Not because they aren't real, but because they don't need belief to survive. They need silence. In Japanese folklore, there is this concept called kamikakushi, literally hidden by the gods. When someone vanishes into a mountain or a forest and later returns changed, confused, or unable to explain where they were, people do not ask any kind of question. They do not pressure for name, they do not reconstruct the event. They know that kamikakushi is not caused by a creature that wants to be known. This happens when a person draws attention at the wrong moment, speaks too loudly, strays too far, notices something they shouldn't, angering the spirits, called kami, the demons, oni, or mischievous creatures like tengu. The punishment is not death, but removal from language. Those who return often struggle to describe what happened, saying only that time felt wrong or that something else was there. If you like watching movies, the Studio Ghibli movie Spirited Away, Sento Chihiro no Kamikakushi, is based on this very concept. If you haven't seen this movie, well, finish the episode and correct that immediately. It's a great movie. I mean, even if you don't like movies, you will love this. And if you think that all of this is in the past, well, think again. You think we outgrown this, We have science, Wikipedia, podcasts where people cheerfully describe their sleep paralysis demon in alarming details. And yet, just let me tell you a couple of names: Candyman, Slenderman, Bloody Mary. Yeah, if you know what I'm talking about, you know that urban legends still play by the old rules. You don't say the name three times, you don't repeat the story aloud, you don't look directly at the image, and sometimes more than three times, like Candyman. I can say it up to 5 times before he comes to kill me and everyone in the room with me. But yeah, I just said it twice, so no worries. And what about Bloody Mary? I mean, I'm sure you heard of her. If you look in the mirror and say her name 3 times, well, she will come out of the mirror and kill you and haunt you. Well, first haunt you and then kill you, but still, not a pleasure. This legend has terrorized many, many teens in sleepovers and camping trips all over the United States. And I'm not in front of the mirror and I only said the name twice, so also in this case, I'm good. Since we mentioned a couple of movies before, I'm gonna talk about yet another movie. Was one of my favorite growing up, and it's Beetlejuice by Tim Burton, 1988. Beetlejuice is a mischievous, horny ghost that will come and haunt you if you say his name 3 times. It's also kind of charming, though, and I don't know, some people might say his name 3 times on purpose. So far, I think I said it twice only. So when I talk about the sequel, the 2024 movie, again by Tim Burton and with the same actors, more or less, I'm not going to say the title. Just know that is the name of the demon twice. And it's a very good movie. And for all the Potterheads, well, of course, you have yeah, well, you know, the he who shall not be named. Or maybe we don't name him just because we are afraid of him. So let me retry and say Voldemort. I'm still here. He's not here. So, yeah, we've been good this whole episode and we are still good. At the end, we swap folklore for forums, but the instinct is the same. Because somewhere, deep in our collective spine, we still believe this: attention is an invitation. So tonight, when you leave this episode, when you turn off the lights, when your house settles into his nighttime noises, listen carefully. If you hear something, don't rush to label it, because some things don't want a name, and some names are better left unspoken. And so we close today's page of the Atlas of the Uncanny. But remember, stories like this don't end when the telling stops. They linger, they follow, they wait to be recognized. If you enjoy this journey, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing the show with a fellow wanderer of this strange. Until next time, mind the shadows, question the familiar, and never assume you know the whole map, because the uncanny is never far away.